helping you with Acorn and RISC-OS computing.
Right, I'm going to talk you through a bit of the stuff that we've been doing with FAST, and then I'll show you it as best I can over a VNC connection to show you what it can do in terms of a few tests, run it through some disk intensive stuff because that's where it shines most, I guess, and then show you some of the new stuff that we've been working on since your show, really. I'm on an unusual for me computer, so some of the things it does doesn't quite work in the way I expect. So it didn't have PowerPoint, and I prepared a PowerPoint, so I've got some sort of weird PowerPoint viewer thing that's not Microsoft made, so it does some things in a slightly bizarre way. So it may be a bit clunky at times, but I'll give it a go and see what happens. I think I have to share the screen before I show you, before I run the PowerPoint thing, otherwise it obscures everything. So I'm going to try and do that now. You should just be able to see a fast computer desktop there. I'm going to try and open the slideshow now. It should say RISC-OS bits now, so and then I know I've got it working. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a bit about FAST, what it does, how it works, what kind of happens with that. It appears to have some sort of autoplay on, which I didn't realise, so I'll just do it as quickly as I can. So FAST stands for Fast Access Storage Technology. It runs on proper SATA-based stuff. So it's using SATA over ADFS rather than SCSI, which means that we have the option of up to 4 SATA ports rather than on some of the other computers, 1, or on some of the other computers they have more as well. Both the current ADFS computers allow for more than 1 SATA port. So it's quite handy if you've got more than 1 disk, and it does now, as a recent-ish development, allow you to run, excuse me, SATA. This is going to be a pain in my backside if nobody else does. It does allow you to run SATA optical drives, sort of direct from SATA. There's no real benefit to that, and for most people, a USB connected one is probably as fast as people want it to be. It's just if you want it all tidy and all inside, that option's there. One of the SATA ports has an option to be external. We don't generally enable that by default. And when I say enable, I mean cut out a little bit in the I/O board so that it's there. The main problem with that being that it's the first drive on the board. So if you plug something in there, it then becomes the boot drive and takes over from everything else, which makes it a bit awkward. You could obviously like reconfigure the drive so that it's booting off a drive 5 or drive 6 or whatever you wanted to. Most people, I guess, would boot off a drive 4, and then if you plug something into the external port, that becomes drive 4, and everything moves down 1, and then it doesn't boot in the way that we would normally expect it to do. And as you may be aware, it's based on the Raspberry Pi Compute Module 4, which normally runs at 1500 megahertz, but we overclock it to 2 gigahertz. We have had it running at 2.3, and that might be pushing it a little bit. So we tend to stick with, we'll ship it at 2. If you choose to speed it up a little bit, you can do. How that works for you, I'm not really sure in the long run. We call it fast because it is possibly the fastest RISC-OS computer in the world. Possibly. According to Chris Hall's benchmarks, that seems to be what he's saying there. And it also seems to have the fastest disk access of any current RISC-OS machine. It's about half the speed of direct RAM access, And in exploring some of that, we've kind of discovered that the inhibiting factor at the moment appears to be file call rather than the speed of data transfer. So if we have something like NVMe, it may well not be any faster than using the SATA card that we use. And if you combine that with the fact that it's got the fastest RAM and fastest CPU of any current off-the-shelf RISC-OS machine, that's why we dared to call it fast. And when we were developing it, and the developer had got it running, and I said, "What's it like?" He said, "It's fast," and we kind of stuck with that. It just seemed like a really simple name. And then, as Vince has pointed out previously, we had to make it into some sort of acronym somehow, rather than just leaving it as fast. So some of the other features of this, which are not dissimilar to the things that you get on the Pi, in some ways, it's got 4K screen resolution as standard out of the box. We've currently limited that to 4K at 30 hertz. Somebody said that when they were running it at 4K at 60 hertz, they had some data loss. We've not been able to replicate that, but we don't want to particularly take a chance on that. So we've kind of said, try not to do anything above 4K at 30 hertz. The difficulty for me with that is I personally find 4K completely unreadable. Even on a huge telly, it seems everything is just way too small for what I don't want it to do. So I've never really tested it on 4K. I've got one of those super ultra wide 3440 by 1440 monitors, which is just about right for me. Once it gets to a higher resolution than that, I begin to really struggle. So I'd never really tested it. We did test it after I'd managed to find somebody with a 4K telly to be able to plug into, and we couldn't repeat the data loss. But just to be on the safe side, as I said, we've said try not to run it at more than 30 hertz unless you're prepared to take that risk. The advantage we've got with it as well is it's upgradable in as much as you pop out the compute module 4 and you pop in a different one with more memory or whatever you want to do. So a bit like, there are fewer options for upgrades, but a bit like in the old RISC PC days, if you want to upgrade a bit of memory, you can, and you get to keep the old compute module and do something useful with that if you want. So it gives us that option. We tend to ship it with either 2 or 4 gigabytes. We've sold a few 4 gigabytes, but most people go for the 2 gigabytes RAM one, thinking that if that doesn't do what they want, they can upgrade at a later date to 4, or when it's enabled in the ROM from RISC-OS Open, they could go for 8 gigabytes of RAM and see whether there's any benefit to that. I doubt there will be, because it's RISC-OS and it used to run in 512K. So whether that's necessary, it may well be if you want to run Linux on it, but as a pure RISC-OS thing, it might not particularly be worth it. There's built-in hardware acceleration for the graphics, as there is with most Pi things, and we have those options of like well-documented, good community support Linux options that you don't necessarily get with other chipsets or other systems. The vast amount of information about Raspberry Pi OS is huge and helps people solve most issues if they're going down that Linux path, whereas some of the other variants are a bit more sparse on that. So some real-world examples then. In tests, we managed to compile a Pi ROM in 3 minutes and 20 seconds, which was a surprise to us. We thought it had gone wrong, and that's direct to the disk. If we're doing it direct to RAM, it compiles in 2 minutes and 46 seconds. Again, if you look at Chris Hall's benchmarks, that far exceeds any of the other computers that are currently around doing that by some magnitude as well. And Matthew from the RISC OSM app when he was doing some data conversion to test it for us to see what it was like under prolonged duress. Said it converted that data twice as fast as the current machine that he was using, which was roughly around the same price, I think, when he bought it. I guess he was that impressed that he just didn't give it us back. He did give me some money in return, but he kept the system and uses that as his main development platform now. So some considerations in how we've done it. One of the problems with the standard off-the-shelf Pi ROM is it was configured to use the PCIe slot to directly drive the USB 3 port. So the PCIe slot was just looking for a USB 3 chip and nothing else. Now, that broke it where we were concerned, because we wanted to use the PCIe slot on the board for the SATA ports. So we had to do quite a bit of work to unpick the ROM and the HAL to get rid of the bit where it was saying, this is what we need this USB 3 port. That's why we've got to do a custom ROM build, because it won't work on a standard Pi, because it won't see the USB 3 ports. It will just fall over at that point. And similarly, a standard Pi ROM won't work on fast, although it just won't see the SATA drives. So you'll end up running it on SDFS, which has no real advantage to it. So that's why we need to do the custom ROMs, and we recognise in the long term that's not where we want to be either. But until somebody's done the work on the HAL to make it, I guess, device agnostic when it comes to the PCIe slot, that's going to prove problematic for us. In mitigation for that, I guess what we've said is we'll provide a minimum of 4 ROMs per year to keep up with major trends in what's happening with RISC-OS Open and what they're doing. And I think currently this year we've provided 3 since February, and we're kind of saying we're going to hold off now until 5.30 is available. And when we get to that point, then we'll try and rebuild around the 5.30 baseline and take it from there. The other issue is there is a low availability of compute module 4s. We've got enough to see us through for a while, and whilst other Raspberry Pi 4s, 3s and 0s are becoming more widely available, and I think the shortage on those is pretty much over, the availability of compute module 4 still seems to be fairly slim. And if you look on eBay, you can pick them up for 3 or 4 times their original value. But we've got enough to get us by for now, in the hope that come Q3 proper, some of that's reduced and they're more widely available. Compute Module 4's lasted a lot longer than Raspberry Pi 4's in terms of stock at the beginning of the component shortage. And I think as a result of that, they're now not coming back into stock as quickly as Raspberry Pi 4s. Some other more positive considerations, then there's relatively easy compatibility options with other boards. So if you've got another Compute Module 4 board, you can just pop the Compute Module 4 out, as long as there's a PCIe slot for the SATA card. We've tested a couple of boards that work particularly well, as opposed to just using the Raspberry Pi official one. And just with the PCIe slot, you plug it in, it works in exactly the same way as the other did. So there's some compatibility there, and that compatibility with other compute modules. Pull one out, put a new one in, you've upgraded. It's cheaper than any of the other SATA-based RISC-OS systems. Even the ones that are quite old are substantially more expensive than what we're doing. And some of that is down to the fact that the Raspberry Pi official I/O board is cheaper than we could ever make anything like that at that point. And using that as the base of our system makes it really cheap, whereas some of the other boards are using either in-house designs or single board computers that are more expensive in the first place. The beauty of the Pi system is there are lots of them, they make lots, and they manage to make them cheap. We've got that potential for dual screens in future if Geminus is rolled out to the Raspberry Pi. I can't see why that wouldn't just automatically be compatible with Fast. So suddenly then you've got an option for 2 huge tellies that you can't see rather than just one. And we've got those easy Linux options. So using Raspberry Pi or other Linux variants developed for the Pi that are better documented than some of the more obscure ones. You've got that option of going up to 8 GB of RAM if you really need to. I can't imagine what you'd do with 8 GB of RAM, but sometimes people just want that. And it has that standard wireless chip that gives us an advantage. Should somebody develop wireless for the Raspberry Pi for RISC-OS, we're kind of there already. It's already built in. It's just a case of getting it running. Some of the recent developments that we've been doing are we've put quite a bit of effort into big disks. So those are disks up to 2 terabytes in file core format that we can supply and use. Where we have some problems there in that obviously if you try and format a 2 terabyte disk using H-form, it'll go, that's 256 gigs, so I'm not sure what you're doing there, and it will only format it to 256 gigs. So we have to format the disk for you, because we have to use, as bizarre as this sounds, a Linux program to format it in file core format at that size and recognize those 4K sectors, or as we're doing, emulate those 4K sectors as well. As I said earlier, we've got CD soft TAPI built in now into the ROM, and the thing that we put a bit of extra effort in was getting big disks to be available alongside standard up to 256 gigabyte disks. For a while, we had an option where you chose either big disks or standard disks, but we've now managed to get those to both work alongside, which I'll show you later. We've got a bit more work to do on hats, although I'll explain a bit more about that, because the compute module board doesn't do hats in the same way as a Raspberry Pi does. It channels some of the pins from the hat connect to the GPIO stuff to control the display ports, the DSI ports, and the camera ports. So we have to tweak with some bits of software in the ROM before we build it to get that to work in the way that we would expect. So at points, we've had a Wi-Fi hat working, and then at points, it's failed again. And even with conversations with Rob from LSR, we've not quite bottomed what it is that makes it work sometimes and what doesn't. And I guess the Wi-Fi hat is the only real hat for now that RISC-OS users tend to use. So we haven't really tested anymore. That's where we seem to think that the market is likely to want to be. So we haven't gone any further than testing it with a Wi-Fi hat. And once we get that working, then we'll look at, I don't know, I'm not sure there's a parallel and serial port hat, I guess, again from LSR, but I don't think there's that much else that we tend to use. And then we've got some software in line for over-the-air firmware updates. So rather than a bit like the Ionics, if you had that IO Watch program that would say there's an OS update, do you want to install it? And it will install it for you. It will check that it's okay, and give you an option to roll back if you don't like it or there's something wrong with it. Now, some of the other things that we're planning to do in the future with it is we're looking at whether we can build a support board so that we can just use it off the bat in a standard ATX case with a standard ATX power supply. At the moment, we can do that, but then the power supply won't turn on and off. The buttons won't work. Or we can power it with a 12-volt supply through the I/O slot at the back, and we can get buttons to work and LEDs to come on, but we can't power it on and off in that way. So what we're looking to do is build a separate add-on board that allows standard cases, all the things that we expect, like disc lights and power lights and reset switches and buttons, to just work out of the box. Currently, we have to supply it with a separate real-time clock, and we don't have any means of controlling a fan, although we don't fit in with fans because with the heating that we use, it doesn't get warm enough to warrant a fan. The on-board real-time clock and the fan on the Raspberry Pi I/O board is on a different I2C circuit that we can't see. So it's kind of hidden from us. So we're kind of struggling with that and working away how we can get that enabled so that we can use the onboard real-time clock, although we still need to write a driver and the fan control. Again, I know Chris Hall has done some work around that by building a separate board to do that, but we were looking at the onboard one to get that to work if we can. We're looking at NVMe support, but we're not really sure what the benefits of that are in terms of whether it's going to make it any faster or not. And if we did enable NVMe support on this board that we use now, it would give you the option of one drive, whereas currently using SATA, it gives us the option of 4 drives, which seems currently a bit of a no-brainer. I'd much rather have extra drives rather than something that's marginally faster but not particularly that much. And we look at, and I'm guessing we're leaving this to 5.30 eMMC support, which this past week has been the bane of my life. eMMC stuff used to work with 5.28 on all systems with a compute module. It would work on 5.28, and then they put some eMMC stuff into the ROM, which seems to have broken the ability to use SD cards. So that's become slightly problematic for us. And it again, according to Chris Hall, he says it depends on the card that you use, but all the cards that used to use that I've got under 5.28 no longer work under 5.29, the most recent ones, and that's a right pain in the backside in terms of that. Now, luckily for us, as I said earlier, we've got our own tweaked HAL, so it means we don't necessarily have to worry about that because our HAL doesn't recognize the eMMC stuff yet. It'll boot from it and load up the fast system, but then without extra software, you can't save any changes to CMOS. You have to write those manually to the CMOS thing. So that's slightly problematic for us at the moment, and we're waiting until that's settled down with 5.30. But otherwise, we're kicking at a moving target, I think, to mix my metaphors there. And we're looking at a smaller system, probably something roughly about the size of a 3.5-inch hard drive. I guess a bit like an A9 to some degree, to see if we can do a mini system, and that might mean that we need to do some things differently. We've got some different SATA cards that we're trying to get to work, and hopefully at some point in the near future we'll have like a smaller pocketable option, but then we may have some other smaller pocketable options that are preferable by that point. Okay, so current pricing for the machines, if you want just the SD card and access to all future updates and the SATA hardware, because you've already got a compute module and the compute module I/O board and a drive and a power supply, then we can do that for 99 quid, and you can just go onto our website and just buy that. Click a box, PayPal will do its thing, and we'll post some stuff out. If you wanted a kit, which is the SD card, the ongoing support, the SATA device, a formatted 250 gigabyte SSD, an adapter so that you can mount it in your own ITX case or ATX case, and an adjustable shield, because some computers are very slightly different. So we've got 2 different models, and we suspect there may be more. So this one, you just make it fit how you want it. That's 149 quid. A flex, which comes in one of our oak and acrylic cases, is the same as kit, but comes with a power supply, and a real-time clock is 199. And then the 2 systems that we do more often than not is the Fire, which is 2 gigabytes of RAM, a 2 gigahertz CPU. It's a working system, all in an aluminium ITX case. Just comes to you in a box. You unplug it, you plug it in, pops up on your screen, and you're away, and you're going really fast. Sorry about that. And then the last one is the Fury, which has got extra RAM. It's got a 1 terabyte file core drive, an optical drive as an option if you want it, and that comes in either the standard ITX case which we use, which is pretty much premium, or you get a choice of some more. Especially if you want the optical drive, that won't fit in the standard case that we use, so you have to upgrade to a case with a slot drive option in there. Okay, I'm going to stop that bit now, and I'm going to show you some things that Fast can do. So I guess if I look at the disk intensive apps, the first one is WROCC. So I'll show you WROCC as the first thing. There we go. Yeah, I'll not do that search. It's not so much fun. So I'll go to a new map, and I'll go for the standard place that I'm using. And there we go. It's pretty much done that. Now the next bit is to zoom in and out using the scroll wheel. Is pretty much instant until you get to really big map areas, and then it becomes slower. But for the most part, doing small areas, it's pretty good at zooming in. It's as fast as Google Maps. That's what I'd like to say. The real test of it, though, is to zoom out to 1 to 1 million. Chat amongst yourselves, have a cup of tea. But you can kind of see why it took so long with the amount of stuff that it had to process in order to get to that point. If I show you this on a different system, let me just move that out of the way. My network is obviously ridiculously slow today, so I'm doing too many things all at once. BT, generally, I don't think like that. Got WROCC preloaded on there. Do a new map, and I'll go for the same place. And even the sort of fairly zoomed in sort of resolution, it's kind of going considerably slower. If I go back to the same resolution on this one, you'll be able to see. Oh, it's almost instant now. If I go to, though, the 1 to 1 million, you can see the real difference in how long it's actually going to take. I think I could probably do this one now and it should beat it there. Yeah, by some margin. There we go. So the speed difference there between an older SATA-based system and the newer one is fairly considerable, really. And I guess, you know, that's the kind of thing you'd expect with an older system. It's not going to be as up to date as this one. Something else in terms of, there's a hard drive there, which is a standard one, which is a 256 gigabytes. When it's all sorted itself out, it's down to 233. And then there's one there which is just shy of 1 terabyte, but it is a 1 terabyte drive. The reason it's called turnips, and you can obviously rename that if you want, is when we were coming up with it, and the guy doing the stuff around it said, I've got a bit of a cunning plan. And in a reference to Blackadder, I said, is it turnips? And every time now that I format a drive, it automatically calls it turnips. And then if people want to rename that or not, they can do. The other, I guess, one of the other bigger apps for RISCOS is Iris. So I'll run that. Now, bearing in mind, this isn't running with Iris RAM or anything like that. This is just straight from disk to icon bar. And there you go. So it doesn't mess about at all. And then loading stuff is going to be hampered by the speed of my network today. But you can see the loading time, and then you can see the render time. That's always a good website, I think. And it's just kind of automatic in terms of what it does there. I haven't been to this website today, so I definitely haven't been there. But it's much quicker. None of that is going through a RAM disk. I'll show you there that the RAM disk is completely empty. There's nothing happening. In terms of like just actual speed of the disk, I'll do this one. Wrong one, sorry. I've got a video file here, as that was the biggest file I could find, which is at 340 or thereabouts megabytes. And I'll copy that to a RAM disk so you can see the read speed for fast. That's pretty quick. And if I copy it from there to the other drive, you can see the write speed for fast as well. So it's going pretty quickly for a 340 megabyte drive. It's kind of not messing about in terms of that. Even if I copy it direct from, just tidy up a bit, or I'll leave those all over. Copy it direct from one disk to the other, it's not particularly sluggish in terms of how fast it does that. And then one of the other things that people were saying from their perspective, demonstrating how fast it was how fast it would render a PDF as you were skipping through it. People were saying on their systems it tends to jump a bit when it's loading a new page. It's an 82 page PDF, but I can just slide through it. And the issue there is VNC can't keep up with how fast it's doing that. It's just immediate in terms of, as long as I'm in the bar, it's immediate in terms of how fast it's going to do stuff. Because it's reading it from the disk and it's managing to just deal with that really quickly. So I'd never realised, I don't use the PDF reader that much, but people were saying that with other systems, that's one of the things where it's kind of fairly obvious that it's like struggling to process things. So I tested it and it appeared to not have any real issues with how well it does that. So, I mean, in a nutshell, the other thing I would normally do is build a ROM and do all those things at the same time. But not at this point because I don't have the stuff set up for that. Even doing other things, it will build a ROM in like 5 or 6 minutes for a Raspberry Pi, which when you look at the benchmarks for other systems, which I guess I could do, BBC really is hampering me some. So you can see that's what Chris gets in at 3 minutes 20 seconds and 2 minutes 46 seconds to RAM. I think that one must be the titanium then, which is coming in at 5 minutes 26 and 3:38. The OMX6 is a SATA system. That's coming in at 8 minutes 32 or 7 minutes 37 to RAM. So in terms of that, and in terms of the disk speed that you can see there, it's that system there. So it's 11,500% for read and write speeds faster than a RISC PC. Now, if you've ever loaded NetSurf on a RISC PC recently, having used a Raspberry Pi or something like that, I'm always shocked about how slow it is to load NetSurf. I didn't realize it was going to be that slow though in comparison to, or I didn't realize fast was going to be that fast in comparison to what else is happening. So even comparing that with, I guess, the other premium system, the titanium, it's quite a bit faster in terms of this speeds. So that's fast in action. There's not much. I guess some people sometimes say the Apple. If I've got that, the ArtWorks Apple is sometimes a useful test, but I don't necessarily think it is on this because you just can't. The banding I think that you see there is due to VNC not being able to keep up, rather than it rendering it that quickly. But everything does just seem fairly instant in terms of that. And it's a 2 gigahertz processor, as I'd said. But most of that is down to the disk speed that we get using SATA. And we expected it to be reasonably quick. We were very surprised, I would say, when it came out as quick as it did. We weren't really expecting that, even though everything should in theory be capable of that. We still thought, yeah, but it's RISC-OS and there'll be a bottleneck somewhere and there'll be something holding it back. And then it turned out that there didn't appear to be anything to hold it back at that. And especially, I guess, that bit about RISC-OSM and Matthew saying that it processed his not inconsiderable data particularly quickly to the point where he bought one because it saved him that much time. We were like, oh, okay, we could be on something here. That and the opportunity to have the bigger hard drives is quite a useful thing. Obviously, there are some disadvantages. The lowest file allocation unit is quite big with a 1 terabyte drive. I think it might be in the region of 32K or something like that. But the amount of disk space you get, as we say, we can go up to 2 terabytes. 2 terabytes seems to be RISC-OS's absolute limit at the moment, whether you're using native 4K sectors, emulated 4K sectors, or anything. 2 terabytes seems to be where we're going. But when you think most RISC-OS software came on a floppy, that's quite a lot of floppies that you could get on there, and it should be in no way hampering us in terms of what we can do with that. Everything just seems to run particularly quickly, hence ultimately calling it fast, I suppose. Okay, so that's where we're at with fast. Should I take questions on fast now, and then I'll tell you about some other stuff and then see where we go from there? Has anybody got any questions on fast at this point?
I've not got RISC-OSM, but I was just wondering how big is RISC-OSM as a program? Presumably it's one of the bigger ones in the market.
It is. It's the
Probably
map,
still small.
yeah, it's the map data that's the issue. I think that it loads
Yes.
data from disk, but I don't know. I can have a look. I'll count it wrong. The map data itself is, well, I can't even do the maths on that. 1.5 gigabytes.
Right.
And it's obviously it's got to search through that to get that information. The application itself is 6 megabytes. So
yeah,
so not big by any other operating system standards, but huge.
yeah.
What is that be that they need for that? But yeah, but that does seem to be the one that really shows up the difference in how to do things.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions on this? Which means I've either baffled you completely or I've told you everything you want to know. Could be either of these. I'm going for the baffled bit, just by looking at you now as it stands. All right, in which case I'll tell you about some other stuff that we've got that we're working on at the minute. When I can work out how this PowerPoint alternative does what it's supposed to be doing. To do the same thing of sharing my screen first and then running it. Okay, so we've got some new things that we're doing. I'll go through these a bit at a time. Already realising that I've forgot to bring one through for you to look at, but never mind. So the first one we've got out is the Pyro Cube, which is a very small thing that I've forgot to bring with me, but it is kind of tiny. It's 55mm by 55mm by 43mm, so slightly smaller than the Minim. I think it's got 2 HDMI ports, 2 USB, a gigabit Ethernet, and round the back is the GPIO, and you can use an SD card. And one of the things that this has kind of got going for it, if we can get it to work effectively, is you can run it from either the SD card or eMMC, or you can boot Linux from the NVMe drive by just flicking a switch. Not in the same way that Chris Hall does the flicking the switch to dual boot. It's got options to switch between the two things, or three things in that respect. The internal NVMe slot isn't available to RISCOS at the moment. We'll see whether that changes anytime soon. I'll leave that there. But at the moment, that would run Linux as fast as it possibly could. And it's such a small device, it's such a low power device. I just power it from the USB port on a different computer and it works fine. So if you want to daisy chain a few of those together, I'm sure you could. I'm not sure how it would work towards the end of the daisy chain, but at the beginning, it's certainly okay. The first one, it's so ridiculously pocketable. I thought the Fortress was small when we did that, but that one is tiny. It is sort of slightly smaller, I think, than the Minim, but with the advantage of a 2 gigahertz processor, and if we can get NVMe going, then an internal NVMe drive and enough ports to keep you going with that. Again, it's got those 2 HDMI ports, so if you really want to, should somebody get that to work, you could display it on 2 huge tellies and you'd lose the box, I suspect. The next one out of the blocks is the thing that's been a bit of a pain for me this week, accidentally almost, because I had no intentions of ever running this from an SD card, but then suddenly realised that you couldn't run it from an SD card with the current ROM, so that's a bit annoying. So the Pi Harder eMMC is a smaller, more compact version of the Pi Harder that we generally do, running from a compute module with eMMC attached, and because of that, it tends to run the operating system about 4 times faster than it would from an SD. So our current suggestion for that is load the operating system and any applications onto the eMMC, and there's a 2.5-inch hard drive in there as well, and run any files that you want from that, or save anything else on there. And it's never going to be, nothing we're going to do, I don't think, is ever going to be as fast. But if you've got a standard SD based one, then this is a really good halfway house, where you can run everything faster than you can on an SD. It's still not going to be fast speeds. It's also not going to be fast expensive either. Again, on there you've got 2 HDMIs, 3 USBs, including one at the front. It's got gigabit Ethernet, and it's got 3.5mm audio. One of the things that we've done with fast, because of the I/O board doesn't have 3.5mm audio, we've had to work out a way around that where people want audio, so buying HDMI splitters and things like that, to make it really easy for people to get standard audio if they've got an old DVI monitor or a VGA monitor or whatever it is they're using. Again, it's about half the size of a normal Pi harder, and it's also EDOS capable, so we can load the requirements for Linux onto the eMMC alongside RISC-OS, and then when we boot it into Linux on the hard drive, it will run as fast as Linux on any other Raspberry Pi system, because it's over USB 3, so it runs at around 5 gigabytes per second. So if you want some sort of dual boot option that's faster than what we'd normally do, there's your option really there. The next one that we're working on in the future, actually I'll stop it there, and I'll show you the Pi harder, the original one. Let me stop my share though. So that's the original one. You can kind of see that through the blurring of my zoom thing around the back there, and then that's the new version, which fits on roughly half of it. So it's got slightly fewer ports. So there's one USB port on the front, a power button, an SD card slot. But if we're going to do it with the eMMC, that will be largely redundant. And then around the back, so a couple more USB ports, Ethernet, 2 HDMIs, and audio. And the button works on a hard press sort of deal. Press it once and it'll come on. Press it for 4 seconds and it will turn it off. The other thing that we've discovered with this is it has a little, I don't know if you can see that there, a little OLED screen, which is quite handy for displaying useful bits of information, like how hot it is, anything like that. There's a module around to drive that, and we had quite a bit of fun playing Pong on that really tiny screen for no apparent reason other than you could. Why would you not? It's there. And it does it, and I'm rubbish at it, but I still had to go anyway. So that's the first thing that we've got out of the box, and I'm not kind of sure what kind of pricing we're looking at on that. I mean, we did work it out at one point. I did work it out at one point, and I've since forgotten. But it's not much more expensive than the standard Pi harder, although it's considerably more compact, and again does tend to run on a fairly low power basis. One of the other things with this one, which we haven't got on the Pi harder, which might hamper us in the future, I hope, is it's got a little hole just there that you probably can't see for an external wireless antenna. So should we get wireless set up, a big metal box like this, although it's got acrylic end plates, will hamper Wi-Fi signals somewhat. This is purely metal, but it's got a hole there, so you can put an external antenna in, connect it up to your compute module, and Wi-Fi should just work as it normally would. Okay, let me carry on then. I can remember how to share screens and all that malarkey. So, I might have made a bit of a mess of my PowerPoint at this point, but just bear with me. I'll zoom through these. It's kind of gone back a bit. And then some things we've got in the pipeline that we're looking at is the first one we're currently calling Chimera, which for those amongst you who know your mythology is some sort of mythical beast with the head of a goat. Taking a football thing, goat being the greatest of all time, so it runs Riscos, right, and the head of a lion, Ux. And I couldn't kind of get that one to work really in the same way. So it'll run both systems. So it's got the option of 2 internal hard drives, one to run Riscos and one to run Linux. And it would just be a case of using a modified version of our EDOS stuff to get that to work. And when you turn it on, you can either boot into one or the other. It's got an option if we used eMMC, because it's based on the compute module again. We used eMMC that you could have 3 SSDs in the same machine at the same time. At that point, though, the eMMC would be for booting and taking it from there. Again, you get that advantage that it's 4 times faster than an SD card, and then pick Riscos or Linux as to what you're going to do for the rest of that system. It's got gigabit networking that works like out of the box using the built-in Ethernet port, and because it's got 2 hard drives, again, you can re-equip that in any way you like as a network attached storage device, as a file server, a disk duplicator, if you want, or some sort of storage array. The other thing we're currently looking at that comes along with FAST is something that we're currently calling ECOS, or Easy Concurrent Operating System. So we've done EDOS, which is Easy Dual, but with EDOS you tend to pick which one you want to be in. With this one, we're trying to make it so that you can be in both at the same time. So you can run Raspberry Pi OS in a separate window within Riscos, which is useful to us. There are some things we can do, some things we can't do that Linux can do better. It's a compact little box. It's tiny. We seem to have gone down the tiny approach to things with the newer stuff, and it does have dedicated hardware for the Linux side of it. So it's got either 2 gigabytes or 4 gigabytes direct RAM, another 2 gigahertz processor, and then an SSD for the Raspberry Pi OS to use. So in effect, it's another computer. It's just that we've got a couple of options of how we're going to do that. There's an option for shared data between the 2 systems, which makes it really easy with sort of fairly rapid data exchange. And again, it's got a fairly low power draw. So you can power this depending on which model you're considering from a single USB port on another computer. Or you can power it internally, which I'll explain a bit more now. So one of the options is a hat for our fast system. So it connects up like any other hat inside the case, is powered from within the case, and has ports pointing out for debug and connection that work in any other way. And it's just a standard hat. It takes some of the power potentially from the GPIO, or depending on whether your fast system uses an ATX power supply or not, could be powered directly from any other power connector that's available on that. The other option is a standalone small external box if you don't have a fast system or anything that runs a hat, but you still want this. Again, as I said, it's pretty much a computer on its own. When we were testing some of this, I just plugged it straight into the back of the router and used the USB port on the back of the router to power it, and left it connected there, and just wandered off and did something else. And it ran for days and days and days from a really low power USB port. It can be configured to run individual Linux applications in a RISC-OS window. So I don't want the entire system, I just want LibreOffice. It will just load LibreOffice in a window, and that's what you see. Or I just want a browser, then all you'll get is a browser. Now, for most people, that's not necessarily where people are. They want Linux as a whole. You've still got that option as well, and that is kind of an experimental feature. Linux, for me, feels like a bit of a fickle beast. And when we think we've got it to the right size for the window, it changes its mind and decides it wants to be bigger than that window or smaller than that window, and we can't do the resizing that we want in the way that we want, and we can't work out how it works out how big that window should be. So sometimes you do something and suddenly you've got a black box down one side, or it's disappeared off the edge, which isn't much use. So we're kind of trying to work that out to see how we can get that to work a bit better. It can, if you really want, can be just used as a very small standalone RISC-OS machine. It doesn't need to do anything else. It's got everything it needs in there for it to work. And when we're using it as a hat, it has some internal debug ports for if Linux goes wrong. It makes it easier to be able to find out how that's gone wrong and what you can do to fix it. So if I show you that now, so there's the hat version. You might be able to see that, which is attached to the top of a compute module I/O board. So it's just a fairly standard small little thing there that just fits on top. You can take that off, put it on an ordinary Raspberry Pi. So it doesn't have to be particularly a fast system if you want to use it as a hat. I'll do that slowly because I've forgotten the screwdriver. So if you wanted it on just a standard Raspberry Pi, then there's an option to just do that there and avoid zoom blurring. But yeah, it just fits on in the same way. So it's just a standard hat size to do that. Or if you want it as an actual standalone computer, then there it is. Plug that in wherever you like. Using a USB 2 port will be sort of fairly sufficient. And it's a fully functioning RISC-OS computer, or if you want it as a Linux computer to connect into easily, because it's all pre-configured and set up, then that's as much space as you need on your desk or behind your router or wherever you want to do that. So that's fairly simple in that respect, in that for people who are wanting to run Linux and dabble with it a bit more, there are options to do that. We developed it for fast because we wanted it in there as a as something that ran alongside excuse me, ran alongside rather than instead of. And then because we'd managed that, we thought, well, we could use it with a Raspberry Pi, we could use it separately, we could do other things. All kind of made a bit more sense. Okay, so let me go on to the next bit I'm going to tell you about. This one's a bit more of a... I need to share my screen first, sorry. I must remember to install PowerPoint on this machine. So this one's a bit more complicated. We need to do a lot more work on this, but we're looking at expanding some of the other stuff that we've done into one machine, where we're probably going to have to build the board ourselves. So we're looking at a multi-headed system where we might have 2, possibly 3, possibly 4 compute modules all running different things at the same time. I think initially we're looking at 2 so that we can run RISC-OS and Linux side by side on a custom board that does that and shares data easily between the 2. But we want it to have the fast SATA speeds that we get with fast built into that automatically. So it's going to involve us designing a board with 2 compute module bays plus the SATA chip that we know and love, all on a board, and then see how much that comes in at. It may well become cost prohibitive, and we may well stick with something else, but we'll design it and see where we are. We kind of wanted that to sit in a standard ITX case as normal with full power control, so we'll build those things in as well. And then, given that it's based around compute modules, we have that option of up to 8 gigabytes of RAM, 2 gigahertz plus CPUs, eMMC options, dedicated storage for each head, and things like that. So just taking it a bit further than it is. And then because of the compute module form factor is becoming a bit of a thing, we'll see whether we can use some of the faster chips and compute module boards like the Banana Pi and the WROCC 64, and there's been a couple of new ones in the last few weeks that are all faster than the Pi and are all compatible with the compute module I/O stuff. The only difficulty is, as I said earlier, when you start running niche products like those, you lose that support that you get from the Raspberry Pi community, and everything becomes a bit more difficult. I must have spent 3 days trying to flash Linux to a WROCC 64 compute module, and eventually just packaged it back up, put it in an envelope, and posted it back to him and said, "No, I'm all right, Tom. That's just not for me. If I've got to go through that palaver every time, I can't be bothered." The Pi is dead straightforward. We know how it works. They've built the tools that do that. You don't have to use some really obscure thing that's half in Chinese, half in English to try and get things to just run in the first place. So we're working on that. It's a bit of a longer term project. We'll see how that pans out. But and to my mind, there's definitely a call for something that has at least 2 heads so that we can run effectively RISC-OS and Linux side by side on a permanent basis with all those extra bells and whistles that we sometimes miss out on or compromise. Into the beyond, a couple of things that we're also looking at is we're going to try and make all our systems in some way have the option to use eMMC storage. The speed advantage, especially on the lower level systems, is worth it. We may lose some storage capacity, but the speed advantages are there in terms of that. And most of our systems now have some sort of hard drive storage capacity anyway. So from our perspective, it's worth looking at that. In doing that, we get to make all our systems as user upgradable as possible. If we can turn more things over to compute modules, then people can buy in that 2 gigabyte entry level thing. And if they decide they want more memory later, they just pop in a new one. And if they want more memory and an eMMC, they just pop in a new one, and we can sort of guide people through that process if they want to. We're going to work on that integrated Linux apps within RISC-OS through the stuff that we talked about for ECOS. If we can get that to work more effectively, that could be really useful. It feels a bit like cheating, though, having a separate Linux box doing all the things that we can't currently do. But I'm not sure with some of those things we're ever going to get near being able to do LibreOffice or anything like that. Even though we have our own native versions, their compatibility with the outside world, sometimes we struggle with that a bit. And then look at more things with platforms to work alongside what we do. So things like the Banana Pi, the WROCC Pi 64 compute modules and things like that. And then, as I said before, develop some specific hardware for use with RISC-OS, and in order to make it cost effective for the RISC-OS side, things that are useful on Linux as well. We're not gonna using the risk cost market alone is going to be problematic for us if we're trying to make things cost effective. So we would need to go beyond what we're doing there. And that's it for me in terms of that, really. Okay, I'm done at that. Has anybody got any questions or anything like that?
Press the space bar, guys. Can't believe you're all quiet tonight.
Well, brilliant, then I'm done. That's all for me. That's it. One last thing I didn't talk about, which might be of interest to you, Andrew, is the add-on for the Pyro Noir, so that you can have a separate solid-state drive in that rather than just a standard SD card. So that's quite a nice little addition to that. Solid-state drive goes in the bottom, and I'm not actually sure whether we can't sneak a hat in there as well, which might be quite nice. Not sure how we're going to do that, but maybe a possibility. So that is a natty little add-on to the Pyro Noir that bought at one show, and Steve Fry at one, I believe. So perhaps I ought to tell him.
Yeah, I'll look forward to that.
Okay then.
The two computers that showed us after the compute talk, the small ones, you didn't give us any prices for those. Have you got prices for those?
I've got prices for those, but I'll have to load some stuff up to have a look at them. Which one are you thinking of there?
I'm getting a bit confused. You've shown us so many tonight. Sorry.
The EMMC, was it that one?
I think so, yeah.
Let me just have a look. Just bear with me. Got to look on my own in development web pages to see. Thinking about changing them. I think that with that one, if that's the one you meant, that's the version.
Yeah.
They're probably basically 20 quid more than they would be for a Pi harder. So that one with 4 gigabytes of RAM, 32 gigabyte eMMC would probably come in at like 209, 219.
Okay, yeah.
Going up to, if you had more RAM and if you had a bigger hard drive, it'll go up slightly. The 32 gigabyte eMMC is the maximum that the Raspberry Pi compute module will do. It's always needed that, but you can go up to 256 gig. The stuff that we did with big disks isn't at the moment translatable to like SCSI, FS, or anything like that. We're with it on ADFS because we've had to modify some elements of ADFS to get it to work.
Okay, yeah. No, I wasn't looking at mega size hard drives. Thanks.
The development work you've done for the big disk, is that eventually going to be the rule?
Hopefully, and the problem again, some of the problem that we've got with that is because we've had to modify the HAL. If we gave it them now, it'd be of no use to them whatsoever. They wouldn't be able to see that. So when we can get to a point where the HAL allows us to just use nightly builds, then that will make sense at that point. But for now, we're kind of struggling with. We've had to break the link to USB 3 in order to get SATA to work, in order to get ADFS to work with SATA, and then it only works on ADFS. So we're kind of between a bit of a rock and a hard place at the minute, and that we'd like to give it to them, but it'd be of no use to them, and it makes no sense at that. Hopefully, at some point, and I know they did what they did in order to get the Pi 4 to work, for us, so it made sense at that point. Going forward, ultimately though, they're either going to have to unpick that or come up with some way of sensing what's being plugged into a PCIe slot, rather than just assuming it's going to be a VL805 chip, which obviously is USB 3 but not SATA and doesn't do any of that other stuff. And I have been looking in a bizarre twist for a standard PCI card that has the VL805 chip and the same SATA chip that we use to see if they both work together, but I haven't found one so far. So if I come across one, I'll give it a go, and there'll probably be a plume of blue smoke, and that'll be the end of that. Never mind, giving it a go.
In general, do you see us any future moving away from ADFS into, I don't know, one of the other standard disk formats, or to make life easier in the long run for a bigger disk than that?
I suppose it would, yeah. I suppose that would be an obvious thing to do, and the fact that like file core now seems to be the limiting factor on disk speeds and what we can do with that, kind of makes sense that we should probably go somewhere else. The only difficulty with that is how much stuff would it break, and I'm not technically minded enough to know that. And what would we pick? And then we'd have to have some sort of 4-year discussion about what other file system we should use, obviously. And there'd be 2 camps, and we'd split off. Anyway, that's a different issue. And we'd all do different things. And then if we'd done that, what would the advantage be? We've still got that things that our programs are really short and sharp and load really quickly. We don't have a massive amount of really disk intensive stuff that needs huge amounts of disk space or really, really, really fast disk speeds. So we may well do that and realise that there was no real advantage to that, other than we got disks that would contain every ROCC app ever 5 times, and you could keep your video collection on it, but you'd have nothing to play it on because ROCC can't do that. Apart from that, I think, yeah.
I don't know if you had a look in the chat comments, Andy. One of the things that somebody said, Mark Stevens, it regards the fact that it's silent as a key feature. And later on, there's some interesting names you might like to take up.
Yeah, you see, I looked at Cerberus. There was 3 heads. Or was it 2? I can't really remember.
As far as I can remember, it was just multi-headed. I can't remember the specific numbers.
Yeah, I know, because I'm sure that this is really sad, but Cerberus had a brother who had either 1 more or 1 less head, but he got killed, so I didn't really want to go with that kind of name.
Yeah, no, I just thought the first mythical creature that I could think of, which also had more than 1 head, and first thing that came to mind was Cerberus. I suppose there's a marketing thing there as well, because our company using Hydra for theirs, you could say that Cerberus is biting at the heels of Hydra.
Find him. I think going back to Mark's point, the bit about it being silent is one of the things when we were talking about the noisy RISC PC fan earlier. Is again, we don't. The RISC PC seemed really quiet when I had one, when it worked, and then the fan got a bit like gooey and made a horrible racket. And now there's no fan in the fast system at all. So apart from the blue light on the front, you're not going to know, and the fact that it's like on screen, you're not going to know that it's on. It's not particularly warm. It's not going to warm your room up, and there is no sound. There's no noise coming out of that at all. It's just completely silent, which is a bit of a bugger. If there's been a power cut, you don't know whether it's on or not unless you can see the light.
Any general questions?
No, it was.
I'm not sure how far away we are from a Pi 5. I've got a feeling that, like Mark's said something about that, and Vince.
Enormous.
Yeah, I'm not sure we're a long way, if we're a long way from a Pi 5 at this point. Whether
I don't think a Pi 5 would be able to run RISC-OS anyway. I think they're more likely to go 64-bit with one.
yeah. I think it's potentially, and depending on how they do it, could be the end of it for us. Although the Pi 4's got a huge end of life sort of timescale left. So and it does most things as fast as we need. Or the Compute Module 4 is as fast as we need things to be. So, and I guess we just shouldn't worry about it. What is it? 35 years of doing this. We've got this far, haven't we, since 1987? So let's not worry so much. Well,
It's all quiet, yeah.
no, nothing else.
Well, aside from ordering the add-on tomorrow from you, no, I'm done. Thanks.
I don't know. It's on the website already, I think, the add-on.
It is. I was just looking at it, but I'll order it tomorrow when I'm more awake than I am now.
Last thing I'd want you to do is order 2 by accident.
It would be a shame.
That's a case to go with it, wouldn't it?
What's the fastest performance with video? Is it
It's impossible to show you. And I tried that,
right.
but because it's running over BNC,
Yeah, BNC will slow it down, yeah.
BNC bit like being really laggy.
Yeah.
It is. It's like watching telly, I guess. Is all I can say. I watched Big Book Bunny. Seems to be the one that's really easy to do, and it's fairly clear and just very smooth. The other one was the one that I showed you copying between 2 discs, which is a zombie film based at CERN, which is really bizarre. But anyway, obviously didn't have enough physics to do that day and did something about zombies instead.
You need to let me know what the title of that is, because I'll have to look out for that.
I think it's called Decay or something.
Sorry?
Decay.
Decay. Right, brilliant, thanks.
That will set the conspiracy theorists away.
But it just runs it like it's watching it on telly, depending on the player that you need to use and stuff like that. Again, it's not hampered by the disk speed, hampered by the processor speed and the player that I haven't tried it with a DVD drive. I will just say that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. People don't really seem to want optical drives anymore for various reasons. I guess it's just easier to buy a 20 quid one from Argos, hit it and plug it into a USB port and it'll just work.
Bluetooth, will that be coming more to your range, do you think? Or because somebody was doing some work on a Bluetooth, I saw on the forum a while back, but it seemed to have gone very quiet.
I seem to remember seeing something about Bluetooth a long time ago, where one of the issues is paying the license to the people who own the Bluetooth. I could be completely wrong about that, but I'm sure there's something about there's a license involved with saying we've got Bluetooth that might hamper everything. And like from my perspective, I'm just not a fan of Bluetooth. I find it really cumbersome and difficult to use on things that it's supposed to work on, and I just find it really problematic. So I don't think I'm going to do any work on Bluetooth or get anyone to do anything on that, because it doesn't appeal to me, and this is all about me.
Yeah, true.
In a bizarre twist, I guess that is where I started with this, I wanted a case with all the ports on one side, so I made a case with all the ports on one side, and now I wanted a computer that had fast SATA, so I've made a computer that had fast SATA. And I don't know what I want next. It's not Bluetooth though.
You're going to have an empire soon, Andy. You're going to have a big empire.
Well, I wouldn't say a big one. It could be very, very small. And I'm hoping there's an untapped market of WROCC users who are keeping really quiet somewhere, but I don't think there is.
Oh, I know it's not the right thing. Are you still selling stuff through that website that's what do you call it? I've forgotten how you pronounce it now. Sorry?
The Etsy website.
Yeah.
Occasionally, I think, I don't know. I think I've dropped out of their algorithm to some degree, so I don't get many sales from there.
Right.
And they have all paid me on time so far.
All right.
But I've read that that Etsy have rowed back on the reserves thing, haven't they, and changed the mind.
They've said they have, but they haven't said when, how much, or what. So it's all up in the air still. So
yeah, I saw that earlier in the week, and I thought I'm just going to pull all my stuff from it because that just sounds like a palaver.
Yeah. Well, it makes me wonder if they've got financial trouble and they're just trying to stock up with people's money to help save themselves.
Very possibly. To be fair, if they kept all my take-ins from that, they wouldn't make a lot.
Yeah. I just wondered if you've been affected by it. I thought I could have remembered you had a shop on there at one time. So
I kind of more dabbled in it than anything, and I think it I don't know. I think it relies on you doing something, doing something with it all the time for it to push your stuff. So I don't do something with it all the time, and I largely leave it alone. I think it kind of goes, ignore him. He's not contributing enough. We'll leave him alone for a bit.
Yeah. And
so when somebody does a search for pie case, I don't come up anymore. Whereas in the beginning, because I was dabbling with it a lot, I seem to come up a fair bit. But now I've dropped back. So, and it's not. And in some cases, excuse me. In some cases, no pun intended, that by the time they've taken all the fees and everything like that, you're left with a little bit of pocket money.
Yeah.
But sometimes I don't think you're even getting towards a pint. Some of it, it's just like they've just grabbed a little bit here for this and a little bit there for that. You have to do your postage through them, or they charge you extra. Next thing you know, you've got £4 left. And well,
yeah, because the pies are very cheap. Well, not have been, apart from lately, have been very cheap, so not much margin on them. So,
and I think that's been one of the issues, isn't it, with pie? Is like once you're starting to pay more for the case than you're paying for the actual machine that you're going to put in it, people are a bit reticent, understandably so. But then if you want something specific, it's likely to cost, especially in our market where if we sell a few, we think we're doing quite well. The scale of it isn't going to mean that we're going to sell a bucket load, and we're not going to be able to do it on a as cheaper basis as the people who produce thousands of them. It does make it difficult, and I always thought that if the pie's 35 quid, it was going to spend 30 quid on a case to put 35 quid computer in.
Yeah.
And then your margins just become largely non-existent, or in some cases it costs you to actually produce it and sell it. But hey, I wanted to throw my ports on one side, so I did it.
Yeah, usual problem of people wanting everything at the lowest possible price with the maximum things in. Yeah, seen that before.
Yeah.
Anybody out? Anybody come on? Roll up.
Just wondering if you could use sign numbing as part of your advertising. It was so good, I kept the computer.
If I were going to use a quote, that would be the one, I think.
Yeah, we used to do that in music magazines, if you're doing a review or something, and, I liked it that much, I kept it and paid for it. So.
Wasn't there something else on telly where it was so good? Was it a shaver or a razor or something that?
It was Victor Kayam.
Oh, so good about the company. Yeah.
That's the one. Yeah. Obviously, it being like something to do with shaving, I had no idea about that at all.
No, passed you by completely.
Yeah, sorry about that, Mark. I keep sending you. Keep keeping them. Sorry about that.
revealing secrets. Well, it must be a good enough business for you to keep going, even in these hard times.
Yeah, it stacks up just about.
Yeah. So do you see supplies of both commute module 4? I mean, I'll not tongue twisted, and that improving over the next few months, or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like I said, it looks like the Raspberry Pi is you can just buy one from a shop now. It's fairly easy.
They're starting to come available again. Yeah, they've been cranking up production,
and they might run out after a few days, but they've certainly. It's not as difficult by any stretch of the imagination to get hold of one. I used to look as perhaps some others of you do, the RPi locator website, where they'd have one green line because there was one place in the entire world that had got something in stock, and now you're on to 2 pages of green lines before you're running out of stock of things. And they are sometimes they are things that I kind of think who still buys a 3A plus. Somebody must do because they're still producing them.
yeah.
But then a lot of them now are 4 gigabyte and 8 gigabyte Pis, so they must be selling again, and they must be building enough. Compute modules are a bit more rare, I guess. I occasionally see them pop up, but not to any real degree like the Pi stuff. But as I said, they took a lot longer to run out. You can buy compute modules for ages after the Pi 4s dried up completely. Not least, I think, because they released them after the component shortage had kind of kicked in. So, but as people have released more and more things that need a compute module, they suddenly sold out, and the I/O boards kind of sold out.
Yeah.
But I'm assured to some degree that Q3 is when everything gets back to being normal stock.
Yeah.
But we shall see.
Yeah, I've heard prices on some people have been selling compute modules and Raspberry Pis at silly prices on eBay at astronomical prices, trying to get people to buy them at God knows how many times the normal price.
Yeah,
I think there was a Pi 4 probably 6 months ago now. I think somebody was trying to sell a Pi 4 2 gig for about 300 quid or something down. And somebody was buying it.
well, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Is people have gone along with it and bought a Pi 4 for silly money, which just emboldens other people to try and sell their Pi 4s for silly money.
Yeah.
And I had a bit of a special offer, I think, right at the beginning of the component shortage, where I was doing some like really bizarre buy one get one free thing. So if you bought a Fortress, you got a Pi Zero thrown in because they cost me like a £5 at that point, and then 2 weeks later they were selling for 35 quid, and I'm like thinking, oh well, never mind.
Yeah, it's a thing. But yeah, I know that I think it was the Pi Foundation was saying that they've ranked up production and getting now over 100,000 a week or something, or they're producing. They've just about caught up with the backlog of orders. But yeah.
And I remember looking at websites that were saying we'll have stock in September 2023, still in April 2022, and I'm like, well, I'll not order one of them just now. Then I'll just
yeah.
come back
Well,
later.
I think it was on Farnell. Somebody said they put an order and they were told they'd get it in about February 2024 if they were lucky.
Yeah.
So yes, it's the lead time. But getting the parts, as you say, but they even had to change one of the parts. I think was it the network chip? I think in the Pi 4000 or Pi 400 or something. Yeah, that caused problems. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they've kind of fixed that now, haven't they?
I think it was Sparrow who came up with a fix for it. Yeah.
But yeah, they did do that, and they do that very rarely. But when they do, it's like a real issue for us. Whereas for Limit, it's like, well, we'll just carry on. There'll be a driver there with it anyway. But for us, it means somebody's got to go off and work out how to do that.
Yeah. So yeah. That probably partly because of the problem we have with the kernel, I suppose, being in the assembler, etc. So making things more awkward to change.
So Mark was saying in the chat that aesthetically he liked the original Pi Hard, the one that was wood and acrylic, the best out of the recent machines. And it literally was the fact that everybody was buying acrylic for their shops that killed that. The cost of the materials to just build the case went up astronomically, or you just couldn't get hold of anything like clear, even though the stuff we used had like a green tint to it on the edges to make it look like glass. And if you got a metal band around the end, you couldn't really see that. So Greggs were just using anything they could get. Not necessarily Greggs. I'm just bitter about Greggs. They were just using anything clear that they could get hold of to put in front of their staff to protect them at that point. And I'm sure most of it is just dumped around back of their shops now, and I can just go and pick it up. But it kind of killed that machine, really, because we just couldn't get hold of the stuff to do it with anymore. We could still get odd colours.
I thought it was cool.
Sorry?
I thought it was quite odd that, of course, they were using that as separators on panel shows, so using panels on the panel show.
Yes, I also blame Have I Got News for You. Not just Greggs. Although, Have I Got News for You?
But at least Greggs use pies.
Anything else?
Yeah. So has anybody else got any further questions they want to thing to discuss? Silence again.
Sounds like
all you shy people out there, all these shy people out there.
I'm scared to talk because he'll try and sell me something.
You're okay this year, aren't you? This is your year off.
Yes, which means Wakefield next year might be a tad pricey.
Oh no.
Okay. Right then. I'd like to thank Andy for a very interesting talk.
Thank you.
I'm to think if we've got any more pennies left. And that we spend, but sort of thing I think I spent up for this year. Might have to save her for next year's show.
You wouldn't tell me things like that. I'll be looking for you, Chris, to see where you are.
Yeah, well, the show is on for next year, by the way. It's some people, members will know about it by now if it's in the newsletter. But yes, we are holding it in Bradford next year. Again, Wakefield's still being used for the refugees. So things will be in Bradford. We booked early because basically we were apparently the very first. Yeah, we were the very first event to be held in the fully refurbished exhibition and conference centre at Bradford this year. We got there about 2 days after they finished it. So literally, when you walked in, I walked in on the morning. The aroma came out of it, so fresh, and
We were the first people to put gaffer tape on their lovely new carpet.
Yeah, that's right. Put our footprints on it. And they've been doing a big promotion thing to promote the place. So we booked it again. I will say it is a lot more expensive this year. Well, next year, I should say rather. The hire charges have gone up dramatically. But we will somehow absorb it for the benefit of the community for at least one more year anyway. What happens after that, I don't know. I've got my own health issues to worry about at the moment, longer term. So, but yes, we have got on 27th of April, it is booked, and we'll see how things go. But other than that, unless anybody's got any other issues, I'd like to say thank Andy for tonight's meeting. I'll stop the recording. I'll stop it again. Where is it? Still trying to record it again.
Still says recording here.
Oh, it must be mixed. We're still recording it. So yeah. Okay, I'd like to say thanks everybody and good night to you all.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
See you
Much
now.
appreciated.
Okie dokie. Night night.
Bye.